Welcome to GCD Technologies. Prerequisites to learn Selenium. See, Selenium is a test tool. It is for automating web applications and it supports functional testing. Okay, first, it is a test tool. So, we must know the testing fundamentals, manual testing, knowledge or experience. Next, it supports web application testing. So we must familiar about web environment. Say functional test tools, object-based test tools, or you can say element-based test tools. Based on front-end objects only, functional test tools perform test operations. So you need to familiar with about user interface, web user interface. So HTML basics. Next, for functional test automation, programming is required. See, you take any functional test tool like UFT, RFT, Silk test, Water, Selenium, etc. They use any one programming languages. See, programming knowledge is required for automated testing, functional testing, automated functional testing. For example, for performance automated testing, programming knowledge may be optional. For test automation, this one, test management using ALM or Jira, programming knowledge is not required. They are for documentation only. Documentation and generating reports. But for functional testing, automated functional testing, programming knowledge is required. So, in order to learn Selenium, we need to familiar with these three things. One is manual testing knowledge or experience. Why Selenium is test tool. We are going to conduct testing. So testing basics required. Next, Selenium supports web application testing. It supports web applications only. It doesn't support desktop applications. So we need to familiar with web environment. At least web UI, web user interface, front-end elements like buttons, edit boxes, next images, links, etc. All they are HTML elements. So you need to familiar with HTML basics. Next, for automated functional testing or functional automated testing, we require programming. So programming knowledge is required. So these three are the important prerequisites to learn Selenium. Others also there. Suppose if you know the database fundamentals, means SQL commands or SQL queries, then you can conduct database testing using Selenium. Others also there, but these three are the most important. Next, manual testing experience or knowledge. Generally, manual testers try to learn Selenium for their job enhancement, betterment in their job roles. Nowadays, with only manual testing experience, no bright career. So most of the manual testers are learning automation, particularly Selenium. Next, for freshers, some people are trying to learn Selenium before they are joining into the job. That is also good. For that, manual testing knowledge or experience I plan it. See, in this manual testing, we have so many concepts. First one, software development life cycle. Why software development life cycle? Software development life cycle for developers. Okay, but our testing, software testing, an integral part of software development. See, in software development phases, take any software development life cycle, whether it is waterfall model or V model or any other model, agile methodologies. Software testing is an integral part of software development. So, software testers must familiar with ESDLC. Okay, if you have software development lifecycle knowledge, it is better. Next, software test levels. Say, in olden days, for example, in waterfall model, we have only one stage of testing. It is after coding. But nowadays, importance of quality has been increased. So now we have 4 levels of testing: unit testing, integration testing, system testing, and acceptance testing. Say, testers may vary from one level to another. For example, developers conduct unit testing. Next, end users may conduct acceptance testing. User acceptance testing is there. There is subset of acceptance testing. Next, we independent testers conduct testing in system testing level. Ours is system testing, testing on integrated system. So for learning Selenium, you need to familiar with just system testing. If you know the SDLC, software development lifecycle process, then it is good. Next, software test types. See, basically we have 2 types of testing. Other subtypes also there. But in high level orientation, we have 2 types of testing: functional testing, non-functional testing. See, in non-functional area, we have several subsets: performance testing, usability testing, compatibility testing, reliability testing, etc. High level functional testing and non-functional testing. Our Selenium supports functional testing. So we need to familiar with the functional testing concepts. What is functional testing? And one more thing, in our software testing, 80% market share is functional testing. Remaining 20% only non-functional testing. So functional testing is mandatory for every software application. Okay, functional testing can be done using manual testing as well as automated testing. Okay, we must know the functional testing concepts: input domain coverage, next output domain coverage, database testing, etc. Database testing is subset of functional testing. Okay. Next, database testing is also subset of structural testing. Database testing 3 types: structural database testing, functional database testing, non-functional database testing. Nowadays, database testing is independent concept. But in our scenario, we conduct functional database testing. Functional database testing. In our scenario, database testing is subset of functional testing. But it is also part of non-functional testing and structural testing. That is different. But as a functional tester, you must know the database testing fundamentals. Okay, input domain coverage, output domain coverage, database testing, etc. Non-functional test knowledge not required for our Selenium. Next, software test design techniques. Generally, software techniques say exhaustive testing is impractical. Exhaustive testing means testing with all possible inputs and preconditions. It is impractical. That's why we use test design techniques to reduce the input and output domains. Reduce the input and output domains, but we try to cover all areas. But for automated functional testing, okay, you may have black box test design. If you have black box test design techniques like equivalent classes, boundary value analysis, decision table testing, state transition testing, etc., then you can collect test data easily. Okay, white box test design techniques not required for you, not required for Selenium. Next, experience-based techniques not required for Selenium. See, if you know black box test design technique like equivalent class partitions, boundary value analysis, decision table testing, state transition testing, use case testing, enough. There is also limited use. We use programming in our Selenium. So if it is large size input also, we can cover using programming logic. Okay, next important topic, important knowledge for our Selenium. Software test life cycle or software testing process, in which test planning. If you know the test planning, manual test planning, then for automated test planning, you can easily survive. Next, test design. If you know the manual test design, here deriving test scenarios, documenting test cases, and collecting test data. If you know the test design, then you can easily create or write Selenium test cases. Next, test environment setup. If you know the knowledge or experience in test environment setup, then it is easy to set up the Selenium. See, for Selenium test environment, some more software is required, but similar. Next, test execution. Yes, if you know the test execution knowledge, then in Selenium testing using Selenium, you can easily survive. In our Selenium also, after writing test cases, we execute test cases. Analyzing, after execution, analyzing result, find if you find any deviation from expected, reporting defects, tracking defects, next conducting regression testing, all are very similar to manual testing. But there, manually we execute the test cases, but here tool can execute test cases without human user interaction. Next, test cycle closure. So testing fundamentals point of view, software test life cycle or software test process is very much important for Selenium. In this STLC also, we have 5 to 6 phases. Test design phase is very important. Test design phase. Next, I already told, for functional automated testing, programming knowledge is required. Every functional test tool uses any one programming languages. So our Selenium supports 6 programming languages: Java, Python, C#, .NET. Next, C# enough. C#. Next, C# is nowadays part of .NET suite. Next, without .NET suite also, you can find C#. Java, Python, C#, Ruby, JavaScript, and Kotlin. It supports 6 programming languages. You no need to use all programming languages. You can use any one of those languages. Suppose most of the Selenium testers nowadays using Java, nearly 72% according to a market survey, 72% Selenium testers are using Java. Okay. Next, what are the important programming concepts required for Selenium? Say programming environment setup. How to install programming language. Suppose if it is Java, download Java and install. Set Java environment variable path. Next, Java doesn't have UI, means editor for writing and executing programs. So download Eclipse IDE like editor. Next, from Eclipse IDE, you can write and execute Java programs. Suppose if it is Python, download Python software, install. After installing, you can get a Python shell. Using that Python shell, you can write and execute Python programs. If you want to use Python for Selenium, for that specialized IDE is available. PyCharm, use PyCharm, then you can integrate Python with Selenium and other plugins also, PyTest, etc. Okay, next focus on language fundamentals. Say, in our test cases, we handle different types of data. So you need to familiar with data types and variables. Data types for specifying the data and variables for storing the data. Next, operators for conducting mathematical comparison and logical operations in our test cases. Next, control flow, conditional or decision making statements, loop statements, and branching statements. Next, object oriented programming concepts. Why object oriented programming concepts? Observe, our Selenium supports most of the object oriented programming languages. Java, object oriented programming. Python, object oriented programming language. Next, C#, object oriented programming language. JavaScript, object oriented. Next, Ruby, object oriented. Kotlin, object oriented. So familiar with object oriented programming concepts. Class, what is class? Object, method, constructor. Next, 4 principles of object oriented programming: inheritance, polymorphism, abstraction, and encapsulation. Next, language specialized concepts. Say, apart from fundamentals, some specialized concepts are there. Suppose, I think nowadays strings, data structures also part of programming fundamentals. Some are dealing under specialized concepts. For our Selenium testing also, strings, knowledge on strings, arrays, data structures are important. Next, other specialized concepts other than fundamentals and object-oriented programming. IO, input and output operations, reading user input, file handling, next, database connectivity, etc. Next, exception handling. Say, in our test cases also, we need to handle runtime errors. For handling runtime errors in our test cases, we use programming exception handling code, etc. Next, HTML fundamentals. Say, I already told, our Selenium supports web application testing. Selenium automates browsers, that's it. So you need to familiar with the web UI, web user interface. Functional test tools are object-based test tools. Based on front-end objects only, they perform test operations. Suppose enter username into username 8 box. Here, use 8 box environment. Enter password into password 8 box. 8 box, password 8 box environment. Click sign in button environment. See, most of the functional test operations related with front end elements are objects. So we need to familiar with HTML elements, HTML basics. Say for database operations, no front-end object reference is required. But for most of the functional test operations, front-end objects like edit boxes, links, images, checkbox, radio button, drop down, etc. Object reference, object or element reference required. Next, suppose performance test tools like LoadRunner, JMeter, RPT, Rational Performance Tester, etc. They are protocol-based test tools based on protocols, HTTP, HTTPS, ODBC, JDBC. They conduct test operations. But our functional test tools are object-based test tools. So you need to familiar with the web environment for conducting testing using Selenium. See here, web are HTML elements. Web are HTML elements. See, image, button, link, checkbox, radio button, drop down box, list box, combo box, frame. Frame is not element, section of web page, etc. Next, actions on elements. Suppose actions, entering a value into 8 box. 8 box is element, entering a value. Entering a value is action. Value is parameter. Entering is action. Click a link. Link is element. Click is action on the element. Next, check or uncheck checkbox. Checkbox is element. Check is action. Uncheck is action. So you need to familiar with web elements and the actions on elements. Next, HTML tags. See, HTML, hypertext markup language for web design. It is tag-based language. Tag-based language. So we need to familiar with the tags. What is H1 tag? Header 1. H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. Next, P, paragraph tag. All these are H1 to H6 and P, paragraph. All these tags for content. Next, A, tag name A. Anchor tag for links. Next, input tag for edit boxes, etc. So familiar with tags, HTML tags and attributes. Some attributes are there. They define type of element, title of element, etc. Next, HTML forms. Already I told forms. HTML form or web form. HTML form or web form means section of web pages, sections of web pages. Next, graphics and HTML media. See, nowadays in most of the web applications you can find media. Suppose HTML media means here audio, video, etc. So if you want to learn and use Selenium for testing, first to learn or go through manual testing concepts, programming fundamentals, and HTML basics. Then you can easily learn and you can easily work with Selenium. Thank you.